Committee. We're going to ask for a report. And item number 1, this is a special meeting in CAO's office.
Item number 1 is a City Administrative Officer report relative to an alternative management structure for the Los Angeles Zoo and a request for authority to release a request for proposal for the zoo's operation and management. This item was continued from the June 14, 2011 Arts meeting.
Thank you. Could I have a CAO give a PowerPoint?
Good morning, Veronica Salumbiras with the Office of the
Just ask
CAO.
everybody on the left side of the room, could you see the screen okay? If you move to the right side of the room, you could see it better. Okay, thank you.
The item before you is the CAO report relative to the alternative management structure for the Los Angeles Zoo. What we have today is a PowerPoint presented at the last regular committee meeting. This PowerPoint was also presented by Mr. Miguel Santana at the Zoo Commission meeting of May 17, 2011. We want to start by showing the city's 4-year budget outlook. It shows projected revenues and estimated expenditures for the next 4 years. For 2012-13, the projected revenue is a little less than $4.5 billion, while projected expenses is $4.8 billion. So we're looking at $281 million projected deficit for next fiscal year. The projected deficit for 2013-14 grows to $304 million and to $311 million in 2014-15. For 2015-16, the estimated expenditure exceeds projected revenue by approximately $250 million. Next, we want to show, to give an overview of what we have been through in the last couple of years. The city has addressed $1 billion in collective deficit. We've used fiscal first aid techniques, long-term financial planning solutions. For fiscal first aid, we have looked at overtime use. We have improved billing and collections procedures. We have explored fees for services. We did debt refinancing to lower interest rates. We have sought state and federal assistance. We have offered early retirement incentive program to our employees. We have deferred and in some cases canceled capital projects. We have used the reserve fund. We have instituted a managed hiring process, and we have implemented a furlough program. For long-term financial planning, we have reduced 4,000 positions through the early retirement program or the budget reductions. We have replenished the reserve fund. We sought Charter Amendment P that requires a 2.75 emergency reserve account within the reserve fund. We are addressing major drivers of future deficits. We sought a charter amendment looking at a new pension tier for new sworn employees. We are developing a new pension tier for new civilian employees. We have negotiated increased co-pays and contribution amounts for healthcare. And we are pursuing alternative service delivery models. In February of last year, the Council adopted the CAO's 3-year plan to fiscal sustainability. The 4 major elements of that 3-year plan include smart fiscal policies, focus on core services, sustainable workforce, and alternative service delivery models. Through research and surveys, we have identified several benefits of an alternative management structure for the Los Angeles Zoo. One is to stabilize, reduce, or eliminate the general fund subsidy, increase operational efficiencies, improved and expanded fundraising, improved marketing and advertising, greater operational flexibility, greater ability to pursue commercial activities, higher attendance and higher revenue, improved concessions and resultant higher revenue. We looked at zoos across the country and found that most have governance structures that involve both the public and private sectors, and the most common model involves a society or nonprofit directing the day-to-day operations and policy setting, while the local government continues to own buildings and grounds.
Can I ask a question? Of those zoos that are listed there, do any of them have what would be a joint public employee and a zoological society operation, or they are one side or the other? What is the...
I think some of the zoos transitioned over time, so
But we don't know for sure if there's any existing that have a continual workforce that is the public. I'm looking for a public-community process in this. I'm not necessarily looking for a public-private. I'm not looking for an amusement company. I'm not looking for anybody. I'm looking for an educational, zoological society that has a care for animals, number one, first, and the variety of impact of that to educate people young and old on what life is in nature, etc. But in any of those forms, whether it's Denver, Dallas, Tulsa, Chicago, Fresno, Houston, Atlanta, or Seattle, are there places that have a public continuation
These
partnership?
Zoos, Mr. Labange, these zoos don't, the zoos that we've referenced here are not ones that are operated by a for-profit company,
Right, but do any of them have a...
amusement park type.
I got that. Okay, they're all what I would call what would be my standard. I'm sure Mr. Reyes' standard, zoological societies or support groups for true care for the animal, not an amusement operation. But are any of them have a joint public city employees and private would be non-city employees in an operation, or do they all transfer to a non-city employee operation? Or do you know? And if you don't know, it's okay. We'll find out.
Yeah, I believe in some cases the employees became employees of the new entity, and in some cases they transitioned over time. It's kind of a mixed bag.
But none have continued to still be public employees and...
And I believe Tulsa has continued city employees.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Denver, Dallas, Tulsa recently shifted into an alternative management structure. The other zoos listed, Lincoln Park in Chicago, Woodland Park in Seattle, Zoo Atlanta, Houston, and Fresno, all transitioned within the last decade. We also looked at other government-owned facilities with alternative management structures. In the area, we have the Hollywood Bowl, we have the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, Seattle Aquarium, and Central Park in New York City. Councilmember, you asked a question about whether employees remain county employees. In LACMA, there are county employees, and they've, I think, transitioned over several years ago, and there are still county employees that work for LACMA.
And in Hollywood Bowl, I think there are county park and recreation employees, but that's a point. Okay, thank you.
Next, we want to look at the current zoo structure. As everybody knows, it is currently operated as a city department. The total operating budget is $17.5 million. $6 million of that is general fund subsidized, and there's another $8.6 million in citywide budget and support costs for the Los Angeles Zoo. There are 229 authorized full-time positions. We have an advisory zoo commission. The council approves admission fee increases. The general manager is a city employee, also the zoo director. The budget is subject to annual appropriation through the city budget process, and the operation and management is under direct control by mayor and council. The next slide shows the adopted budget for this fiscal year and for the last 5 years. For 05-06, it was $17.9 million. For 06-07, $19.3 million. 07-08, $19.2. 08-09, 19.3, and as you can see, for 09-10, it was reduced to 18.2, and in 10-11, the current fiscal year, to 17.4 due to the city's financial constraints. Next, we have a graph that shows the projected zoo expenditure growth for the next 5 years. The total cost would increase by 25% in the next 5 years. As you can see, the graph shows that the retirement and health benefit costs to be the major driver, increasing costs by 56% over the next 5 years. Salaries would also increase by 19% over 5 years. Next, we want to show you the projected city costs for the next 5 years side by side with projected operating revenues. The operating revenues cover less than half of the total cost of operating the zoo. Based on projected revenue and expenditure growth for the next 5 years, the percentage of the total operating cost offset by operating revenues will shrink from 45% to less than 40%. What this means is that the city must find other sources of funds to support the zoo or reduce services at the zoo. The next slide shows the authorized full-time positions in the current fiscal year and the last 5 years. The total number of regular authority positions is down 15% from a high of 268 positions to 229 positions for the current fiscal year. The 10-11 adopted budget includes 229 regular authority position. There's 1 resolution authority position and 1 substitute authority position for a total of 231 position. 109 are in classifications that are unique to the zoo, and 53% or 122 are in classifications that are common among city departments. 88% of zoo employees are represented by the Coalition of City Unions, 10% are represented by the Engineers and Architects Association, and 2% are non-represented. Our office engaged the services of KPMG, a financial consultant, to assist us in the financial analysis. We also needed them to determine what potential cost savings might be generated through an alternative management structure and to help us identify an operating model that could provide us with opportunities to improve cost efficiencies and revenues. The city attorney recommended that the city conduct a request for proposal process to select an operator for the zoo to maintain transparency and fairness in the selection process. In summary, the city's goal is to improve and enhance zoo operations while stabilizing or reducing the general fund contribution. And the alternative management structure benefits that have been identified include operational efficiencies, improved and expanded fundraising, improved marketing, operational flexibility, ability to pursue commercial activities, higher attendance, improved concessions. The next steps would be to obtain authority to release a request for proposal from full council. We need to finalize and discuss challenges and solutions with the city attorney and hopefully release the RFP this summer. We need to review responses to the RFP and select an operator in the fall. Begin transition period in winter through spring of next year, and to fully implement the alternative management structure in July 2012. That concludes our
What's
part.
your favorite animal at the zoo?
Giraffe.
Giraffe. There,
Oh.
good job. Okay, good. I have a few questions. Mr. Reyes, you have a few questions?
Yes, quite a few.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead.
Sure, you go first.
Okie doke. Well, good morning, folks. Wow, we're all awake, aren't we? It's okay. Well, I want to thank the staff for their hard work, and I do have several questions. And essentially, when we look at what's being addressed as a admission price, we don't speak to that till page 10 of the CAO report. And I believe part of the purpose is to provide access to the whole city in terms of enjoying the zoo. So we have statements in there that says, shall ensure that admission prices are competitive and within fair market value of comparable attractions and zoos in Southern California. So I'm not sure if you're referring to Disneyland or Universal Studios or what venues were you referring to, but the last time I looked, those are pretty expensive places to go to. So I wanted to get an understanding of how that's being assessed when we look at competitive and fair market value as it relates to a zoo of our size. I can get a report back from CEO and CLA to understand that comparable, unless you have an answer for us now. But maybe what I should do is go through the questions,
Okay.
and then that way, because there's quite a few, Mr. Chair, and I'll try to get through it as quick as possible. But I think that's a significant issue in terms of who is the zoo for and who has access to it.
Mr. Reyes,
yes,
we
ma'am.
do have in terms of the zoo admission is pegged to zoos of similar size with 1 million attendance of approximately 1 million visitors a year. So we're not looking, the zoo prices is admissions, they're not looking at Disneyland, they're not looking at amusement parks, they're looking at comparable zoos. So we do have that information
Okay.
available. So the plan is not to suddenly end up with, I think Disneyland is now $88 a person, and that's
Right.
not the direction that this would be heading in.
Music to my ears.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we do have that, and we will get that. For
Okay,
you.
great. I appreciate that. Also, we're looking at the notion of how we're comparing entities when they go through this transition. And I get a report back from the CEO and CLA that speaks to a spreadsheet of all the zoos that are cited that includes the following comparable information, which is the admission prices before and after the AMS restructuring, scope of attendance increases and or decreases before and after the AMS restructuring, any changes to admission prices before and after the AMS restructuring, change in municipal subsidies, if any, to the respective zoo facility before and after AMS restructuring, change in staffing before and after AMS restructuring, and which of the zoos studied were municipal departments prior to AMS restructuring. And then we have the scope of municipal subsidy before and after restructuring. So give us a better sense of trends and directions and how this would work. Another area that I'd like to explore would be, given the RFP process, how many responders, thank you. See, I was doing my best. I was faking it without my eyes. Okay. Given the RFP process, how many responders does the LA Zoo and or the city attorney anticipate will respond to the RFP? What is the size of this marketplace? Other issue, what happens if only one entity responds? Do we proceed? Next question, the KPMG analysis cites a possible increase in revenues opportunities based on information provided by other zoos. What zoos are they referring to? Are they comparable in size, inventory, marketplace to the LA Zoo? Next bullet, the CAO report states there appears to be increased fundraising capability for those zoos that have transitioned from the public operating structure. The question is why? Do our current city regulations and ordinance allow for corporate signage at our zoo? Were our current rules taken into account in the KPMG analysis?
You could provide that in writing to this, because they're writing their hands off, I think.
Right. Let me do one more question. Actually, I have about 6 more, but you get the gist.
Ask them more. I mean,
if you Okay. want to
get it on the record, I think it's good.
Well, here we go. The CAO reports. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The CAO report states overall costs can be potentially decreased and revenues increased through a combination of increased management flexibility, increased revenue opportunities, and fundraising, with gradual transition of employees through an attrition program. Why can we accomplish these same objectives through our existing operating agreement with GLAZA? What are the fundamental structural benefits to an AMS restructuring? I'd like to request a report back from the CLA on that. In regards to the current zoo employees, the CLA report states the private operator will be required to submit a transition plan that allows current zoo employees to either remain city employees or become employees of the selected proposer. Will this create a 2-tier salary and benefit employee system under the AMS structure? Will employees that choose to become employees of the private employer have the same salary and benefits afforded other employees? Does the city's living wage ordinance apply to the private contractor? And please have the CLA report back on that. Under the deal points and potential benefits identified by the CAO, no mention is made of affordable access to all income levels, and why is this not a priority? If the city maintains ownership of the zoo and the animal collection, what is our financial liability in regards to earthquake and/or fire damage, animal care, and employee relations? According to a report, the private contractor's transition plan must comply with existing labor agreements. Who will negotiate future labor agreements on behalf of the employees? The transition plan calls for the operator to commit to a 5-year capital program. Who will fund the program? Will all city contracting, hiring, wage requirements apply? What is GLASA's expectation in regards to their operating agreement under a AMS structure? Just given the scope of, and let's hear all the questions, and I'll have a recommendation, Mr. Chair. But I'll stop there, and I'll come back with a recommendation afterwards.
Thank you very much. Yeah, if you could provide that to the CAO in writing, and all that is very good on that. In the report that I reviewed, and it was also stated earlier on in the last meeting that we held on this issue here, it is clear that the city will remain ownership of the Los Angeles Zoo. The city of Los Angeles will own the collection.
That is correct.
That is correct. On this here, the operator must maintain the integrity of the zoo and commit to operate the zoo as a member of the AZA. And all, as this is stated here, in a 5-year capital plan. Can we issue bonds, like a bond issue can we still issue bond issues if there's a partnership?
While I am not an expert on bond issuance, yeah, I think we would, the city could issue bonds on behalf of the zoo. The type of issuance, whether or not it would be tax-exempt bonds or whether or not the
But the county used Prop A bonds to enhance the Hollywood Bowl.
Right.
And it may still be, because that's Parks and Recreation facility for the county. So I don't know, but we should look at that.
I
Would
think,
you
I
make
think
note?
we would have the ability to issue bonds. What type and how that financing, we can get back to, what kind of
Yeah,
a
let's be
potential
real clear,
finance.
because I would hope, because there's been great support for the zoo over the years, that we possibly in another generation would need, or even sooner, a transfusion to complete like the capital project, which we're just doing. Mr. Echeverria, representing the city attorney. For the record, would you like to give us your insight?
Mr. Chairman and committee member, yes, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
With respect to the good morning, with respect to the question about bonds, I too am not a bond attorney, but I know a little bit about that area, just enough to get myself in trouble. I will say that there are issues that arise with respect to the issuance of bonds for facilities where there is, under the IRS rules, a private activity. They consider a private activity to be where we have an operator. Either a nonprofit or a for-profit operator operating the facility, but there are exceptions to that we could pursue, so that if there ever became a need to issue bonds, I think there may be a way to accomplish that if it's a qualified operating contract.
Right.
We'd have to look at that.
Also look at other California cities, and also other those zoos that are mentioned, from Tulsa to
Right.
Dallas to Seattle, et cetera, that was listed there when I asked the other questions on
And
that
we would-
aspect as well.
And we would work together with bond counsel to
find that
try
out.
and find the solutions for those situations. We've been working with the CAO on this RFP for some time. There are some issues that are outstanding yet, and we've discussed them with the CAO, and I believe they're prepared to make revisions to it before it gets to council, so that those can be addressed.
Could you put them on the record?
Among them are the issue of the joint employment of the ultimate manager of the facility, being jointly employed by both the outside operator and the city. We're aware that the county has situations such as that, where they approved that back in the 1970s, and it's continued until that time. Conflict laws have changed and evolved. I can't speak for the county or the county council or the advice that they provide. But I can tell you that we have significant concerns about the ability to have an employee who is both dealing with, let's say, the outside operator on behalf of the city, and with the city on behalf of the outside operator.
Right.
By now, it's become
Could
fairly
we
clear
just
that it's
say,
a classic
the
conflict.
community operator and then the city operator? Because again,
Yeah, we could
if
have
we're
a
gonna
dual structure.
survive in this transformation of all government levels, there's got to be partnerships,
Right.
if we're going to survive. I think I don't like the fact that when you're private, it kind of brings red lights to many eyes, but community partnerships do work.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we could look at that, and when they say outside, but a community partnership as opposed to city partnership.
Right, and that raises questions also about divided loyalties, which you've already
Right.
put your finger on. And in addition, with respect to labor issues, the supervising of city staff by a non-civil service structure would be problematic, and would raise issues beyond that. For example, if there were allegations of retaliation, discrimination, et cetera, against that supervisor by city employees, it would raise questions of liability as well.
Very
So all those would be avoided if we could set up a structure that is a partnership, true partnership, rather than a two-headed person, if you will. With respect to the animal collection, there's a little bit of clarification that needs to be done.
Be an interesting attraction, maybe not in a zoo, maybe at the Long Beach Pike, a two-headed person.
I remember POP.
Right.
There's a question about the animal collection that needs to be clarified. There's a passage that speaks to the city retaining ownership, but the outside operator or the operator having the ability to alienate the rights to the animal or parts of the animal collection. That would be obviously with city approval, and we need that clarified. You raised the questions, Mr. Reyes, about the contracting rules applying. We think this is a situation where the city contracting rules would need to apply, because we're dealing not just with one example that's been cited as LA Inc. does a modified competitive bidding process because they get some city funds. They also have a multitude of other sources of funding. This would be very different from that, significantly different. This is essentially another entity operating a city department and facility, taking the revenues, if you will, that are city revenues and using them for that operation, but nevertheless city revenues, public monies. So we think that the contracting rules would need to apply there as well. And finally, well, again, these are changes that need to be, clarifications that need to be made to the RFP. One other clarification is the liability for incidents that occur at the zoo, whether it's an earthquake and the obligation to repair. Typically, that would fall on the landlord or the owner of the facility, but also for any incidents that trip and falls, dangerous condition type things that happen on city property all the time.
Right.
Who would have the responsibility for that? We've had some issues in other situations where we have a non-city entity present on city facilities. The best way to address that is through insurance and the responsibility to buy insurance, and that way everyone's covered, but that needs to be a little more clearly addressed.
Great.
Thank you. With that being said, Madam CAOs, I'm going to ask that the city attorney communicate in writing all his concerns to the CAO, and that you then alter your draft, and at the next meeting of this meeting, that we see what we would call an updated version of this. Okay, because this is a very important issue that we make sure every step is done right. So if there could be a communication from the city attorney in writing to the CAO to enhance the document so that it would be prepared for further.
I have a question. When we speak to restructuring and formalities and processes, we'd have to formally disband the zoo department?
No, actually not.
Okay.
It would be, the contract would take care of it, the approval of council. Now, there are some actions that would need to be taken, and one of the many areas that I know very little about is labor and employment relations that would have to be taken with respect to the employment situation there, and that would need to be addressed by our employee council. And the CAO, I know, has had some discussions with them already. We're happy to work with them on it.
Right. Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure where you wanted to take this, but I do have some concerns about the timing of how this is moving. And
I have great concerns. I want it done right. So right
Right.
now, we know that the city attorney is going to communicate to the CAO, and probably will take a few weeks, and at some meeting, we'll have another meeting. This will go forward from this committee, if it goes forward, when we have consensus between our city leadership and the administration.
And I appreciate the spirit of that. That's, I guess, what I was going to allude to, and just be very blunt about is, if we can have at least 30 days so we can meet with the stakeholders of various entities that are being impacted by this. Once we get the information back, gives us the ability to understand the position of the stakeholders And that way we can do the work here in committee.
Who's the stakeholders in your opinion, Mr.?
Well, everyone that attends the zoo, everyone that operates the zoo, everyone that works with the zoo.
Right.
There's a whole spectrum of entities
How
out
do
there.
you want to do that? You want to have a committee meeting in front of the zoo on a Saturday?
Oh, not at all. No, you're kidding. Then we need to get some work done.
No.
No, but what I'm saying is that we can take care of this level of work. Follow your lead on how you want to move this, but
Right.
give us at least 30 days to speak to the different entities.
There's a
and
variety of
understand.
issues,
Right.
yeah, but I'm sure at the next meeting,
Well, I can tell you from our part,
Yeah.
it'll be a matter of a couple of days getting our information to the
Right.
CAO and sitting down with them and revising the RFP by next week.
Yeah.
Right.
I understand that, but we're going to have it go back and do, we wanted to try to beat the July 1st deadline, at least to have the first hearing. This is the first formal hearing on this issue here. There will be more opportunity, and it's only going to go forward when it's ready to go forward.
So it could be 30 days. I mean,
Yeah, I'm not,
All right.
I'm not, but I think we got it, the reality is that the budget that we adopted as a council did have somewhat of a timeline thought in by our administrators to say if we're going to be successful. So we'll see. I wish we had the money to do this totally city, and I think all of us do. But we're in a changing dynamic now, and you're looking at foundations, whether it's the River Foundation and
Absolutely.
other foundations.
I agree with you
Try to-
completely. We need to get creative as to how we look at our issues of accountability and feasibility. So
Right.
absolutely.
If I could now, I'd like to call on public comment. Mr. City Clerk, do we have any more cards? Do you have another committee you got to get back to? Okay. Okay, just going to call the cards up. 2-minute comment, if you would, please. And if you don't need it all, you could save it for the next person. If you need a little more, I can share with that. Ron Miller, Victor Gordo, Bernadette Soder, Jeff Bonner. And Jeff, if you could keep your seat for a minute, because I thought there were 4 chairs, but there's 3. Okay.
Councilman, good morning. My name is Victor Gordlo. I am counsel to the Laborers International Union of North America and also here on behalf of the Coalition of LA City Unions. There are a number of issues that have been raised today, all very important. Transparency is very important. The welfare of the animals is paramount. But we also have to think about what the zoo provides for the city of Los Angeles and really for the region. From kindergarten through the highest levels of academia, this zoo provides an opportunity for people to inform themselves, to educate themselves, to research animals. We are very concerned that that aspect of the zoo will be lost. In fact, nowhere in the RFP is that issue addressed. And a contractor looking at the bottom line, we question whether the contractor will make that a priority, particularly because it's not addressed in the RFP. Seems to be an afterthought in all of this. Divided loyalties, the city attorney will address that issue. Staff and supervision and liability, liability with regard to employment matters and liability with regard to trip and fall accidents. That too will be addressed. I want to touch a little bit on the issue of bonds. I happen to serve as president of the Rose Bowl Operating Company. We're undergoing a tremendous renovation of the Rose Bowl right now. When we floated the bonds for that project, we had to do a blended bond float because some of the private entities that are participating, the concessionaires, for example, could not participate in the type of bonds that we were going after. By contracting out this zoo and bringing in a private contractor, you may be limiting the bonding opportunities and therefore the future maintenance opportunities of the zoo. That is a tremendous mistake because that asset belongs to the city of Los Angeles, should always belong to the city of Los Angeles, and the city will have the responsibility of maintaining it.
Thank you very much. Ron?
Good morning. I'm Ron Miller with the Building and Construction Trades and also with the City Coalition of Unions. And I spoke last week on this issue, so you kind of know where I stand. But I kind of relate this as to the city still owning the property and the zoo and the animals and renting them out. And we all know what rental property turns into sometimes. You know, them renters don't take the same care and consideration for the property or the furniture. and ended up running it into the ground. So I appreciate the questions that both councilmen asked today, and I hope we get back some good answers, and I think that's going to tell the tale. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Soter?
Hi, my name is Bernadette Soter. I'm with Friends of Griffith Park. Good morning, Councilmember Labange and Councilmember Reyes. Friends of Griffith Park recognizes that the City Council has yet to approve the release of an RFP. So these comments I'm making here pertain to the eventuality that you might release this RFP. They apply to some stipulations we'd like to see reflected in the RFP. The draft currently states that the zoo opened in Griffith Park in 1966. In fact, there has been a city-owned and operated zoo in Griffith Park since 1912, which means we're approaching 100 years of a Los Angeles zoo funded and operated by the people of Los Angeles in Griffith Park. The public has a long and large investment in its zoo, and we would appreciate seeing that reflected in the final RFP should it be issued. Many of the remarks you made today pertain to that. I appreciate them. Specifically, we ask that the RFP contain stipulations regarding transparency and accountability in its operations. We will still continue to own the property, buildings, and animals of the zoo, so the public part of this partnership remains vital. We would hope that the proposer would indicate their commitment to transparency and accountability in its actions and explain how they will fulfill this requirement, which goes to the highest animal care standards specifically. I agree with some other individuals who've expressed this point, and you have too, that we're not looking for an amusement park operator here. Finally, Friends of Griffith Park feels that the RFP needs to address the zoo's context. That context is Griffith Park. Griffith Park is an environmentally sensitive area, and the operator or the successful responder should explain how they will operate with sensitivity within that context. It's also the city's largest historic cultural monument, and we would like to have the operator, the successful proposer, also explain how they would like to operate the zoo in sensitivity with the fact that it is in our biggest and perhaps most beloved landmark. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jeff Bonner, Rex Link, Amy Rossin.
Good morning. My name is Jeb Bonner, and I've been a resident of Council District Number 4 for over 20 years. In addition, for the last 7 years, I've been the Chief Financial Officer for the Greater Los Angeles Zoo Association. During those years, I've watched as the city's declining support for the Los Angeles Zoo has meant the layoffs of scores of crucial part-time workers, the departure of many longtime valued employees to other city departments, and the closing of zoo facilities such as the library and the petting zoo, both since reopened with GLAZA volunteer support and now the petting zoo with additional philanthropic support from GLAZA.
Do you mind moving the microphone closer to you?
Sure. I have sat in innumerable meetings where innovative ideas to increase the zoo's own revenue generation die because of city rules and restrictions. I spend time every other month on a conference call with other zoo chief financial officers, where Los Angeles and Minnesota are the last municipally run zoos, and listen to them talk about innovative new programs, expanded hours and activities, and a greater focus on the visitor experience than we can provide here in Los Angeles right now. Every other month, I also meet with chief financial officers of other Los Angeles cultural institutions, including LACMA, the Music Center, where I worked for 10 years, and the Natural History Museum, and the experience is the same. Innovation on their part, impediments on ours. It's embarrassing that Los Angeles and the zoo are so far behind the times. I spend every day watching dollars and cents, and I live that struggle every day. Right now, the zoo is just surviving, and the challenges grow every day. For the good of the animals, zoo employees, and patrons, please provide the zoo with the freedom to flourish by approving the request for proposal with the fewest restrictions possible so that the Los Angeles Zoo can reach its full potential for decades to come. I know that there's a great deal of concern about staffing. As coming in 2004, I'm sort of the last addition to the senior staff, so I'm still the newbie there, but I can actually talk to you about how important a stable professional staff is to the zoo, to the animals, and to our public appearance, and that we are committed to making a world-class zoo with a professional staff. If I might have a few more minutes,
Sure.
seconds. So we are committed to that professionalism. I'd also caution that an RFP that provides that all the responsibility goes to a private operator without true authority to manage the zoo in a creative fashion is really not going to be something that GLAZA as a potential proposer is going to be particularly looking favorably upon.
Thank you very much. Mr. Link?
My name is Rex Link. I'm a parking consultant. I live in Los Feliz. I've been around the zoo all my life. I worked twice on Griffith Park property, and that resulted 125 more spaces just by redesign. Now, when these proposals are known, there is no doubt they're going to show up out and watch the present operation. One of the first things they're going to notice is they've got probably one of the best freeway connections that any attraction could have off the I-5. The magazine, from the first place you have to stop at the free, it was more than 100 spaces. However, it's not being run right. Sunday before last was the absolute maximum peak day in Griffith Park for traffic, and there was no one directing traffic. So there was an accident. Then two people show up, two black and white showed up. The freeway was closed, the access to the freeway was closed for an hour. Now, I expect that any proposal will notice that, and it's going to become an issue because it defines the city's obligations here, and I think it's assumed the city's going to handle traffic to and from, which no one is doing right now, and I'm not sure whose responsibility it is, but the simplest thing is to solve it now. No, don't even wait, because it will be an issue later, and we could have an accident any day and have liability for the city out there. We've just been lucky. That's maximum day there was an accident. Luckily, the bike was damaged and the lady on the bike was not hurt. But it doesn't seem to be anyone's responsibility at all. When the Crystal Springs Drive was closed the first time, the question was who's going to open it up for the zoo and Autry, and it was not opened up because no one knew who was supposed to do it. Now it's been worked out. But there is no clear authority on who's running things. And I'm not a traffic engineer.
Just to answer for everybody, the Department of Recreation and Parks used to have a superintendent specifically for Griffith Park that overseed it. Unfortunately, with our budget challenges, those positions citywide have been reduced. In particular to your concern, at Zoo Drive and Western Heritage Way, there's a traffic island about as big as from your glasses to my face. And if they do shave off 24 inches, you could get 2 lanes of traffic off the freeway, which would prevent the bumper-to-bumper access on a popular day. The councilman's working on that issue, and it's still through a community process. Thank you. Hi. Amy.
Hi. My name's Amy Rossin, and I'm a keeper at the Los Angeles Zoo. I love animals, and I love my job. When I was young, my dream was to jump off Shamu's nose. Then I realized I would always have to have a second job working there. Sure, I'd get cases of beer working for Busch Gardens, but that would be not enough money to live in the city and get good benefits. I need to work for the city to do so. I feel that privatization of the zoo makes no financial sense for the city. I'm told that as a keeper, I'm safe, but what happens in 2014 when our contract is expired? The zoo is an educational place for people of all ages. We provide discount prices and even scholarships for schools to be able to take field trips here. These are children that live in your district and have never seen a squirrel, and they are able to come to the zoo and learn because we give them discounts. What happens when the zoo goes private? The schools of all these children will not be able to take field trips. What happens to our education program? All of these things will decrease with privatization. What happens when the private company fails because it is highly leveraged, just like the Dodgers? What is the backup plan? I want to keep my job and I want to keep my benefits. In the grand scheme of things, the zoo is pocket change for the city. If the city wants to still give the zoo money and pay the employees, how is it saving any money? Even with privatization, the zoo could be better managed and maybe make an extra $1 million. The city will still have to put in the balance. With a $500 million deficit, $1 million is nothing. The city needs to better manage themselves and not sign contracts with one vendor like Cisco to monopolize us and jack up their prices 50%, or to not take the lowest bid of construction companies who do such a bad job, and then the city has to spend half the amount of the project to fix the screwed up work. Why can't the city focus on all the mindless spending and keep what the people want, which is the zoo?
Thank you very much. Dan Rossin. Dan, is Dan here? Jason Elias, Charlie Mims.
Good morning. Thank you for taking this time. Basically, I came to represent my daughter, who just spoke, I think, well. Essentially, I'm a going to turn 60-year-old individual, a native of this city, born here, still a resident of this city. And from the numbers that were described and presented, it really comes down to the fact that pensions and things like this are the issue at hand. And continuing employment is the situation, not really anything else beyond that. And the way to do that, you've decided, is privatization. Privatization, I think, if we look around, is essentially going to be what we call laissez-faire capitalism. And unfortunately, that's not what we expect in a representative democracy. We expect you to take the responsibility and find the method to keep our basic entities like the zoo, and it represents LA around the country. I travel quite a bit. You don't find zoos like this everywhere. You certainly don't find them in China. You don't find them in places that are not, basically the United States of America. And I'd appreciate you continuing your efforts to make the zoo continue.
Thank you very much. Jason?
Good morning, Jason Elias, SEIU Local 721 and the Coalition of LA City Unions. I don't think I can say it any better than Amy did. I'll just add, to say that I think what of paramount importance is indeed, as Dan said, to continue to providing, the public service and also the care of the animals. I think if you look at the CAO's report, and it talks about an alternative management structure being able to increase efficiency, fundraising, and marketing. My response to that is, at least for two of those functions, our partners, actually, GLAZA does quite a good job, and I think there's ways that they can actually improve fundraising and marketing, and we would be happy to be partners both with the Department of Zoo and also with GLAZA to make that happen. I think that we have shown the Coalition of LA City Unions that we're a good partner for creating efficiencies, and we want to help make that happen. But, however, even with privatization, bond indebtedness, and other capital obligations are going to continue, and I don't see this as a panacea. And neither did UCLA School of Policy students who studied the zoo for you guys. They didn't see it as a panacea either. So I think before we go that far, I think we need to take a step back, give some time to talk about how we can improve the current system, given the impediments, before we move to the nuclear option, which is basically selling the farm. One last point is that there may be a legal issue also from our perspective. There's no provision in the charter currently for private entities to manage civil service employees. So we may see that there may need to be a charter change in regards to that, and that's a concern for us. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a question for Mr. Reddy.
One question. Do you know if that UCLA study was made available to either the department, to the CAO, the CLA, or the council offices?
Well, actually, through a request that we made actually last week, a letter we presented to John Lewis, he actually provided it to us. So I want to thank him, and I'm sure he would, now that he's listening to me back there, would provide you with a copy of that.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
Charlie Mims.
Hi, I'm Charlie Mims. I'm president of the Los Angeles Professional Managers Association and a longtime resident of Council District 4, a longtime supporter of the Los Angeles Zoo, both through our union and personally. My wife and I are both longtime GLAZA members, and we both voted for the city bond issues to do the improvements at the zoo. And as a further note, until last July, I was a contract administration manager that oversaw the construction of those improvements. So I've had an opportunity to see the zoo both as a public supporter and sort of inside the ballpark, so to speak. I can understand that there's some frustration with management of the zoo because of some of the bureaucracy in the city and the contracting rules and rules on how you accept donations and how you operate the facilities. However, I think the idea of privatization of a city facility creates so many more problems than it might solve. And it struck me that it doesn't seem that anybody's thought about other opportunities to make improvements there. One of which might be setting up the zoo as a proprietary department in the city, similar to the harbor department or other departments where they provide specific value and functions for the city, but they're freed up from a lot of the other city restrictions. They do their own contracting as opposed to contracting through other departments, and they have more ability to manage their own operations. It seems to me that would be a solution that would free up management to be able to do more things with less of the detailed controls, but also not get into the kind of problems with private supervisors or managers trying to supervise city employees, which, as Jason said earlier, that's already been ruled on by the Civil Service Commission from that experience at Hyperion, where you had private consultants supervising city engineers, and the Civil Service Commission ruled that that was not lawful. So it seems to me we need to take a look at other things. And just one other comment, we spent at least $100 million, if not $200 million, in improving the habitats at the zoo, not the exhibits, but the habitats, places for animals can live and we can go and observe them and be educated. That's a terrific investment the people of the city of Los Angeles have made, and I think it's problematic as to whether or not that investment would have been made under a private operator. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Beverly Kenworthy, Heather Shields, Bob Ruth.
Beverly Kenworthy with the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce. The LA Chamber of Commerce is supportive of the model presented to you by the CAO. This is not a privatization of the zoo. This is a partnership between the city and somebody who could run the zoo at much more efficiently than we can right now. We understand that these are tough times, and we appreciate, everybody's concern about jobs, about the animals. People of Los Angeles, this is a real asset, and I think the way that this discussion is moving with the CAO and the city attorney, I think we'll be able to address a lot of these issues. I think it's really important, and I can't think of really two better stewards of the zoo. Councilmember LaBonge, I can't imagine you letting anything terrible happening to the zoo. I know it's in your best interest to protect all the animals and all the workers there, and so we really urge you to move forward and just let you know that the Chamber is supportive of this model. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Heather Shields. I am currently Curator of Education 2. I oversee all the formal education programs at the Los Angeles Zoo. I'm going to speak on two different parts. Personally, I've been at the zoo working as a full-time employee for 7 years now, and prior to that I was a part-time employee for 3 years. And during that time as a part-time employee, I was a full-time teacher teaching middle school and high school science at a private school. And like my colleague who spoke before me, I had to have 2 jobs in order to be able to maintain and keep up with the cost of living here in Los Angeles. Once I was hired full-time, I did receive the pay and benefits of the amount of time and effort and work that I put into my job. I love my job, I love educating children, and it was a dream job for me. Every day in my office, I receive phone calls from teachers and parents looking for scholarships because they cannot afford to send their kids to camp or participate in a field trip because they can't afford the busing costs. And I do have concern about the accessibility to the kids of Los Angeles, both on a private level as far as individual families, as well as schools, because some of these kids are the only time they ever get to come and see the zoo. And it's not just the price of admission. We also offer opportunities for them to get busing. We pay for busing for them to come in. And that is the key. And my fear is that with a public-private partnership, so much effort is going to be spent on getting in money to maintain the zoo and to do things, like exhibits and whatnot, that effort to really get money in to bring these kids into the zoo might be sacrificed to a certain degree. So I would hope that if the RFP, when it is written, when it's set, that is really spelled out as to how we are going to make this place affordable and accessible to those that really count on it as being one of the only places that they can see the wild and to see nature. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Good morning, Bob Ruth. I'm in the executive committee of GLAZA, and this is the city of Los Angeles. This is the greatest place in the world. And we're one of two major markets that does not have the zoo set up properly. We're looking at numbers presented by the city, and we're 40% of the revenues coming in. The balance has to be covered by somebody or something, either the city or through fundraising efforts. GLAZA cannot raise the amount of money necessary, or any other nonprofit, to support that without giving it to a nonprofit public-private partnership. So through the community program and putting this together, it gives them the ability to raise the funds. I'm very pleased with the staff at the zoo. I think they're outstanding. I think they've done a phenomenal job. That's the group that's going to be leading it going forward. They're all there. They're part of it. We need them. The city needs them. So we look forward to building that team of individuals and lining that going forward. GLAZA is non-profit. This is not about eliminating anything. This is about adding to, making it special for the residents of LA. This is about bringing the kids in. This is about keeping the employees. This is about animals, conservation, education, all the things the city started with at the zoo and built up with a great director in John Lewis. Great leadership out there today. So with over a year's worth of discussions about just issuing an RFP, I don't know why you wouldn't issue it to whomever. Let them come back with creative ideas. From a city, it gives you the ability to look at creative ideas. There may be other alternatives, other ways for you to operate the zoo. You may learn something, we may learn something to the process. But it's been under discussion for over a year, and it's being delayed again. So why wouldn't you go out with the RFP? Let the ideas flow, let the residents flow.
I appreciate your hard work. I understand your frustration, but as a policymaker, this is the first time I see any verbiage on the RFP. My very first time. So I appreciate the work it takes to get here. But as a policymaker, to be transparent, I need to ask the questions I've asked. I need to have a partnership with you to understand all your hard work so we move our best foot forward in the next steps. So I want to make sure I'm not trying to stop anything. I'm not trying to stall anything. I'm trying to get clarity as to what are the assumptions, what are the comparables, and what are the impacts.
Good point.
And that way we could have the kind of deliberation in the council floor that gets us to a decision quicker. But I appreciate your insight.
We haven't seen it a lot either, so it's been in discussion, so I appreciate it.
Right, and it's pretty fast if you say it's a year. I'm just saying. I just want to let you know. Bob, you look like an athlete, too. Were you an athlete?
I was.
What did you play?
Tried everything.
You play football?
Yes.
If you run a 36 dive, you want to make sure you get through the line, and you want to make sure you get through the secondary, and you want to make sure you score. We're going to methodically go through this to make sure that we're all partners. Everybody, is there anyone here against the zoo in Los Angeles here? Does anyone want to close the zoo? No one. They want to see it successful. So if we call a play, we want to make sure we have everybody working together and blocking legally with no penalties or anything like that.
Student body right.
Student body right, but we all better be going the right way, wherever that is, Bob. So we appreciate GLAZA. And even in my heart, I look for the partnership that exists. But there's a process, as our city attorney said, that must go. But I thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Last card that I have today is Carol. Coral, thank you, Coral. I'm going to put my glasses on. How do you pronounce your beautiful last name?
Barreiro.
Barreiro. Nice to see you.
Good morning.
Coral, okay.
My name is Coral Barreiro. I was part-time employer for the LA Zoo for 10 and a half years, part-timer. Now I'm full-time after so many years. So when they said privatization, I was like, what? I just got the job. What's going to happen to me? But I'm also worried about my part-time co-workers who have been at the zoo for several years, some of them as long as I have. They say that If we go private, no one's going to be concerned about those part-timers. And these are people who are very proud to work for the city of Los Angeles, even as part-timers, without any benefits or anything, also as employers of the LA Zoo. The affordability, I did outreach for the zoo. I've been to many of your events throughout the whole entire city of Los Angeles. I visited many schools, thousands of schools. And what I always told the kids when I visited these schools with the Zoomobile program was, the LA Zoo is your zoo. You can go at any time because actually you guys pay for it, your parents pay for it because it belongs to the city, so it is your zoo. How are we going to continue this in the future? You know, are we going to make it affordable? The families that visit on Sundays, all the low-income families that visit on Sundays, they can afford it because we keep it very affordable. Are we going to be like the San Diego Zoo that I think what they're charging $38, $40 a person to get in? That's what I'm concerned about. Are we going to lose these people from visiting?
Right.
Also, I was very proud, and I'm very proud to wear the city emblem on my uniform when I was out with the public. I was very proud to be part of the zoo. I love my job. I've been there for several years. But that emblem made me feel part of something bigger and protected. It made me come into places, and I think it gave everybody the idea that I wasn't just any person handling animals. It was a person from the Los Angeles Zoo who also belonged to the city of Los Angeles.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Mr. Reyes, what I'm going to do is continue this matter. I do want to hear from the CAO. I do want you to look at all those things. The one suggestion, what benefit, if you wouldn't note this here, if the zoo was a proprietary department like water and power, like that? Also, what options did we have to try to go to the voters if we wanted to sell this support for the zoo in any which way? And all the other issues that Mr. Reyes is going to provide in writing.
That's right.
You,
I got
so
a copy
that
of the
you can know
questions for
that.
you.
And if anyone has any questions, they could provide them writing to our office. We'll forward it to the Department of the City Administrative Office. And so this is a good start. This is a start where we have a chance to look at this, to see what we can do or cannot do, to see what makes sense. I have a lot of joy in my life, a lot of joy when I represent the people of Los Angeles. I love what Carl said about how proud she is when she has that emblem of the city of Los Angeles. I'm not a tattoo guy. I know if I was, I'd have my mom here, my wife here, and I would have the city seal somewhere. But what you said, Carl, is so important.
Right here.
So important about all those people who worked there and going through the experience that we had when the zoo was challenged by not people who were of like mind in the rally and support, the bond issues that have passed in the last decade shows that Los Angeles does support it. So we got to look for those partnerships in whatever way, community partnerships, and try to draft it up that it works for those who serve us today, who will serve us tomorrow. So this will be continued at such time in the near future, because I think it's good to look outside. Because the truth is, if we went out to Wilshire Boulevard or went out to York Boulevard or went out to Westwood Boulevard or Ventura Boulevard or down to anywhere in the city and asked people their core business, the one thing they would tell us, they don't like the conditions of the streets in Los Angeles as a core issue. And what the CEO's office is trying to do, they love to fund all this stuff, but there's not the money. There's not the money. So we're trying to get off the general fund to try to create a revenue stream for the zoo. So this is one of our challenges. But people in a variety of issues, there's nothing like Los Angeles, and Los Angeles is at the zoo. And the sea of buses is so nice during the week, and in the weekend, the families that are there. So, Mr. Reyes.
Mr. Chair, the comment that was made about our streets in terms of the off-ramps and on-ramps and control, I think there'll be some very good byproducts in how we work at a multi-jurisdictional effort. We should be asking the state how can they work with us on the capital improvement projects in the future when we have money. When we talk about the different kinds of partnerships that go beyond just the zoo around the area, got so many different groups in that pocket. So I look for a fruitful discussion and hoping to see some very creative positions taking place. once we get those answers and
And you're
answer.
very pleased, because I don't know when the last time you've been out, that section of the River Bikeway, it's right next to the zoo. There's a connection from the zoo to the river, and there's so many educational opportunities that they could have, and I appreciate absolutely everybody coming today. You'll be notified for our next meeting. I just want to make sure we have a briefing from the CAO and an updated as we go forward and try to, and then present it to the council and to our colleagues to see if this is a step that we should take as we look for partners to try to do this, whether it's the method that the county used for the Hollywood Bowl, the Natural History Museum, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, or whether we have thought of other facilities throughout our area. Today is the first official day of summer, so everybody have a good summer, but we will talk to you all later. Thank you. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you, Ed. Good meeting.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming over.
Yeah.
I wanted to